Hello and welcome to the Business of Story. I'm your host, Park Howell, and I am so proud to welcome Sendable as our sponsor. Sendable is the social media management platform that I personally prefer to handle all of our storytelling online. Sendable has generously offered you, an ardent Business of Story listener, an incredible 30% discount on their traction plan. It's normally $99 a month, but if you use my link, you can get it for just $69 a month. So visit sendable.com/park30 to start your free 30-day trial today.
I thought it was just a stupid picture of a pig in the ocean. But after hearing that story, I had to have it. Now I wasn't just buying a picture, I was buying a story. Story literally made the picture worth more money to me.
That's what businesses are about. People buy brands, people buy stories much more than anything else.
I work with a lot of big enterprise companies, but let's just say I always tell folks, drop the PowerPoint, close your laptops, start with your story.
If you want people to get engaged and you want people to act, you have to tell them an emotionally powerful story. That's with great characters, it's with uncertain outcomes, and it's with high stakes and drama.
All business strategy is a story.
Guess what? Generation Z is not your father's millennial consumer market, or your grandfather's Generation X, or your great-grandfather's baby boomers, providing, of course, all of those people were in the marketing business. Nope. Generation Z is the first consumer market that was raised with a digital device in their hand, the information of the world available to their heads, and lead with a whole different heart than you may be used to in your audiences. So how do you connect with this market that some say represents more than 40% of consumer purchases? Well, you're about to find out from an amazing researcher who knows the Generation Z market better than most. Sarah Weiss is the CEO of award-winning research studio Bixa. She has uncovered audience insights and crafted user-centered experiences for over 100 brands, including the likes of Google, IBM, Capital One, PBS, Veterans Administration, and Real Warriors, just to name a few. Sarah helps brands deliver products that are captivating, magical, and radically intuitive to the millennial and Gen Z mobile markets. She is with us today to share consumer insights from her new book, Instabrain, The New Rules for Marketing to Generation Z. So who are they? What do they care about? And how can you hook them with your brand storytelling? Oh, and before I forget, just want to let you know there's a bit of an Easter egg at the end of this show, so listen all the way through. Apparently, the Gen Zers really love that stuff. So let's get after it right now with Sarah Weiss on the Business of Story. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. You come to us from where? Washington, D.C.?
Yep, just outside of D.C. in Alexandria, Virginia.
I have been spending a ton of time out there lately. I had the distinct pleasure of keynote addressing the Destination DC annual marketing conference about a month ago in the Kennedy Center of all places. And they did the coolest thing. They did a playbill up and they had all the speakers in the playbill. So it's like you performed at the Kennedy Center and here's your book to prove it. And then they went the extra yard and they framed it. They sent it out to me and I was traveling and I got back and I opened up this big present and there it was. It was so cool.
That is amazing. What a great memento.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. But really appreciate you being on the show today. And we're going to be talking about your book, Instabrain, and what you have found in your travels and your research on Gen Z, insights on millennials, and I guess what I call, having been in this business an awful long time, those pesky consumers out there that we're all trying to understand that have grown up on digital devices and their brains are going 1,000 miles an hour. And what do they care for? What are they looking for in brands? You know, what do brands stand for? And most importantly, what did you find out in this whole trip? But before we do that, you have to give us a little bit of insight about you and how you got into the market research world in the first place.
Yeah, so I actually started out, I majored in marketing and then I kind of stumbled into UX. And at the time, I mean, this was almost 15 years ago, we didn't call it user experience back then, they called it usability. And it was all about whether or not somebody could use your site. And I realized really quickly that it wasn't about whether they could use your site. The problem was really whether they would use it. And so it was a little bit more about the persuasion and trying to convince them to use a site versus actually like, can you use the checkout or can you put the item into the cart or something like that? So I worked for Booz Allen Hamilton for 13 years doing research there for a number of government clients and commercial clients. And then after that, I started my own business. And so I now run a small firm called Bixa Research.
And so what is it about the research side, do you think, going back that really attracted you? Because in the marketing world, of course, people can do all kinds of things, the creativity of design, content creation, writing. Marketing research is such an analytical and yet creative side. How did you think you found yourself there?
Actually, I love hearing the stories, and I chuckle a little bit because I'm talking to like a storyteller here, but I just love hearing different people's stories and asking questions and just having that curiosity to find out more. And I think that's why I gravitated toward the research instead of toward the design of a product or the campaigns or something like that. I just really was interested in other people's perspectives and different types of consumers and how they see the world differently.
And do you think that is a direct reflection of your work in the user experience world because you had to really get inside that user's head? And you said how to persuade them to use it, but is it as much persuading as it is ease of use as well, where you take them by the hand and you take them through the site?
Yeah, I mean, it's understanding what they need and then providing something of value to them. So you're right, it's not necessarily a persuasion. It's more of just understanding what they're thinking and their thought process and what they're going through so that you can give them exactly what they need at different points, finding those magic moments where you can offer them what they need before they even know they need it.
Mm-hmm. And why now? What was it that you felt like that really drove you to write Instabrain? Why this book at this time and place?
Actually, it was going back to a project that I had. It started over a year ago, and it was a large search engine called us, and they were like, "Hey, this is we're having a problem. Kids aren't searching." And it's a problem for us because we're a large search engine. Can you go find out what they're doing if they're not searching? They're on their phones all day long. What are they doing?
And when you say kids, are you talking about teenagers?
Teenagers specifically. Primarily? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So they were like, wow, these teens, they're on their phone 24/7, but they're not going to our search engine and searching.
Yeah, what'd you find?
So this kicked off the research on Generation Z, and little did I know that at the same time, I was also kicking off a new journey for me as a researcher. This audience was doing things so differently. And for the first time in my 15-year career, I felt lost. I would never figure it all out. They moved so fast, and I didn't think I would ever quite be able to pinpoint not just what they were doing, but why they were doing it, those deep drivers. And I felt like I couldn't keep up. But as we kept doing the research, we did all sorts of research. It was a couple of years of research. We did quantitative studies and qualitative studies. We did ethnography and mobile diary studies and video diaries, large scale quantitative studies too. And in one study, there was a turning point study. In one study, we wound up with, it was a quantitative study, and we wound up with 30,000 data points. And each data point was a time that we had asked a teenager, what information were you looking for and how did you find it? It was a very simple question. And we printed out all 30,000 data points on individual sticky notes. And we went through them all. We went through them systematically. Do you know how many sticky notes, like 30,000 sticky notes is? I mean,
well, that's what I was just trying to picture.
So many days.
I must love you guys.
We filled, like, it was every wall of a conference room, like floor to ceiling. We manually grouped everything, and we would take them, we'd read each one, manually group it. And like, I know it was so much work, but it actually started to show us, from that manual grouping and really talking through everything, we started to see real patterns, and it was finally making sense. And it was unexpected, and like the trends were unexpected, and they were different from other generations. And we realized that these were not just millennial lights and the results were much more fascinating.
Okay.
They were going to change everything related to how we do business today.
And before we jump into those results, when did you start this study? How long did it take? And could you define the Generation Z population for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So this study the initial study was maybe 6 months, and then we did other studies following it up, both for this organization and also for other companies in different industries. So we did many more studies, many more companies on this intriguing generation.
And you started those studies when? How long ago was this?
About 2 years ago.
About 2 years ago.
And so, yeah, about 2 years of research went into the book. Maybe about a year and a half of research went into the book.
And then how do you define Generation Z?
Yeah, so they're about 13 to 25 years old today.
Okay.
So they're slightly younger than millennials. And then there's the millennial population, which is just older than that, like mid-20s to late 30s. And then we know about Gen X, which starts around the 40s, but there's this tiny little micro generation that's kind of cool that I'm actually a member of. It's called the Oregon Trail generation. And
what's the Oregon Trail generation?
Named after those big floppy disks. Do you remember them when you played Oregon Trail as a kid?
Our kids did. I didn't, but our kids did.
Oh, yep. Well, yeah. So I'm in my late 30s, so I'm technically a millennial, but I am the Oregon Trail generation because I didn't have high-speed internet in my home growing up. So behaviorally, I'm more similar to a Gen Xer than I am to a millennial.
Interesting.
Even though I'm in the age range. So these
the Gen X or the 40 to early 50s range?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm technically a millennial. This Oregon Trail generation, it's a micro generation in between millennials and Gen X, just for the people that fit into the millennial age range, but don't exhibit the behavioral patterns of millennials.
And so I was purely because of digital, access to digital and not?
Mostly digital. It's funny when we ask, there's two questions we ask to find out if you're in that late 30s range. There are two questions we ask to find out if you actually are a millennial versus if you're in this special little micro generation. And the first one is, did you have high-speed internet in your home in high school? Like not dial-up, but high-speed internet. And then the second one is, are you still on your parents' cell phone plan?
And what did you find on that second one?
It's so funny, but it is very telling because there's a lot of millennials, even when they get married and have kids, they're still on their parents' cell phone plan. So it was just really a really funny differentiator, and that we were able to use that as an indicator of being a millennial.
And if you are the Oregon Trail generation of millennial, then chances are you did not have high speed you were no longer on your parents' cell phone plan.
I don't think I was ever on my parents' cell phone plan. We didn't even have cell phones till I was in college.
Interesting. I had never heard that before. And why Oregon Trail? Just because of the nod to that floppy disk of finding the Oregon Trail?
Yeah, there's a couple names for that generation, but I like the Oregon Trail generation just because I remember being a kid in computer class in grade school and just having, 4 kids share a computer and march across the country dying of dysentery and shooting squirrels.
Well, that now totally makes sense to me in reading you at the beginning of your book. To Nick, for your constant love and support, I'd die of dysentery with you any day. # Oregon Trail generation. Now I get it. I'm very, very tail and baby boomer, even maybe pushing into Gen X a little bit. So I didn't quite get that reference, but now I love it. I totally get it. Okay, cool. So there has been a lot written and a lot of studies on the millennial generation. I mean, it just seemed like people were flipping their tops over millennials. How do we connect with them? How do we talk to them? How do we get them involved in our brand work and so forth? And now, on the heels of that is Gen Z. And that's really what your book is primarily about, correct?
Yes, absolutely. And what's fascinating about this generation that not many people know is that they make up 40% of American consumers today.
I saw that, and that kind of blew me away too. So you're telling me of everyone spending money out there, you can count on the 13 to 25-year-olds to be one of your biggest consumers, providing you've got a product or service that is tailored to them?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really fascinating because they're the largest living generation right now. And I think marketers are just now starting to figure this out, that not only are they making up 40% of American consumers, but they behave so differently that they can't use the same tactics that they once used to market to millennials on this new generation.
What are some of the differences you see? And then we'll dive in even deeper with the Gen Zers, but between the millennials and the Gen Zs.
Yeah, so what's most striking about this generation is how truly different they are from millennials, and especially millennials who are just a few years older. You wouldn't expect them to be behaviorally that much different, but they are. And basically, there's a number of generational changes that happened because of how they were raised. And so there was a big shift in parenting. So there was, I know that when you think of millennials and the parenting style of millennials, you think of the terms like helicopter parent or tiger parent. And so while helicopter parents kept millennials kind of tethered to them and did things for them, tech parents didn't do things for their kids. They taught their Gen Z children how to find information for themselves, how to do things for themselves using technology. But at the same time, they terrified them about all the risks involved in using technology. So everything from online predators to identity theft, everything that could go wrong. So you not only wind up with a generation that is more independent than their predecessors, but also a generation that's a little more risk averse.
That's fascinating. And so while you have the helicopter parents of the millennials, you say not so much with the tech, that they left them a little bit more to their own devices, if you would, pardon the pun.
Yeah. And then another thing that happened at the same time, they were raised, Generation Z was raised in a time of war and recession. They were born after 9/11. They've never known a time without war. And they've seen their parents lose jobs and take pay cuts and budget and clip coupons. And the millennials were raised in a time of a boom and they just didn't experience that. So as a result, we're seeing a generation that is hungry for work. They're hard workers. They hustle. They are side gig savvy. A lot of them have small little businesses, even in high school, to make money on the side and to save money. They've seen their older siblings or their friends come out of college saddled with debt, and they're like, that's not going to be me. And so they're saving for college at a much earlier age than millennials did.
You know, just as you're talking about this, Sarah, I'm thinking about our own kids. And they kind of fall in these three frameworks. They're all born 5 years apart. So our daughter Corbin is 35. She is in San Diego, has a tremendous company over there with her business partner called Powwow Design. Very much roll your sleeves up, hardworking, building out their event designers. They have this warehouse in El Cajon, just full of the most amazing furniture and things that they create. And then they go out and they do these big weddings in the desert, and they do some of the brand sponsorship rooms at the Academy Awards. I mean, they just do some amazing stuff. But I can really relate to her, the business they're building and how they go through it, just rolling up their sleeves and getting after it. And they use Instagram primarily. And if you want to see their amazing work, Powwow Design group on Instagram, and you'll see what I'm talking about. And they have a website. Okay, so that's really, she is kind of our Oregon Trail generation, because when she was growing up, we didn't have internet. I bought my very first Mac when she was probably 5 or 6. We had the floppy disks, and she played the video games on that, and and so forth. When we were in high school, I'm trying to think, did she have high-speed internet in our home? I don't think she did. And then now go back 5 years, and our son Parker, who went to film school, Chapman University, he's been in Hollywood ever since, is right in the middle of virtual reality. He does a ton of directing for virtual reality movies, and he did a really cool music video for Red Bull. Very dialed in to the digital realm. Played Oregon Trail when he was a little kid, but definitely grew up, high-speed internet. And he was on our phone plan through college, but once he graduated, he took that all on himself.
Wow.
And so then I go back to our youngest son, Caden.
Rebel.
Yeah.
Not having his parents pay for a cell phone bill.
Oh, no. He took off. Yeah, he's been doing his own thing. They're all very successful in their own way. I'm very proud of them. And our youngest son, Cade, 26. So just on that tipping point of Gen Z, millennials, just graduated from the Conservatory of Recording Arts and Sciences, has moved up to Las Vegas, and he's working there as an intern for a really cool audio studio up there. I think it's called Studio 77. But he is all about online gaming, building a business out of online gaming, and then he does digital music. He's a DJ and that sort of thing. And I will tell you, with him, I had the most angst because I could understand the career trajectories with Corbin and with Parker and what they were trying to do. It was very similar to my world. But then I realized I don't get the online world the way they do, and how you can actually make money gaming, and people will follow you online, and they've built a small little business in that whole digital realm that they have taught and learned themselves. And I just finally had to get to the point as a dad saying, go for it. I don't understand it. You obviously do. There must be a business model in it. And I suppose of all of them, he is our Gen Zer, at least in thinking.
Absolutely. And they're very, I'm so happy you gave me these examples, because Cade is exactly the Gen Z kind of prototype here, because they are so entrepreneurial and they are driven by these new lines of businesses online. So 61% of Gen Zs want to start their own business, which is incredible. But at the same time, they're still valuing traditional education. So a lot more of them are going to college, and they're valuing the education there. They love learning. They're constantly learning on YouTube. Actually, one of the studies we did was related to learning, and we watched people. Well, we talked to people after they had watched, and Gen Zers after they had watched 3 hours of YouTube. So learning something, whether it was like how to paint your nails or how to beat that level in a video game, whatever it was, they felt like they were learning something. And they were like, wow, I feel like that was a good use of my time. I learned a lot. I learned something. But when they watched 3 hours of Netflix and just binge watched on Netflix and kind of vegged out, when we talked to them afterwards, they felt guilty, like they had wasted their time.
Sarah, and it's so funny you say that, because Michelle and I would sometimes gnash our teeth when Cade was in there in front of his computer, and we were thinking all he was doing was playing games, and we would go in and say, isn't it time you get out and get some fresh air? Typical parent stuff.
Yeah.
And he would say, you don't understand. I'm watching this YouTube piece, and I'm studying this over here, and I'm doing this over there. And it really caused us to completely reframe how he learns and how he goes about things. And by the way, before I forget, I blew that Instagram for Corbin. It's Powwow Design Studio out there. So, typical dad, I said Powwow Design Group, it's Powwow Design Studio. Anyways, moving right along. So
yeah, I love that you said that Cade, though, when he was watching YouTube or something, he was doing one thing here and one thing there, and he was doing a whole bunch of stuff at the same time, because one of our findings was that while millennials can juggle about 3 screens at a time, meaning they could be watching a video game and reading a Reddit thread and maybe texting some friends all at the same time, Gen Z can do that with 5 screens at the same time. They can, they call it, a lot of people call it multitasking. It doesn't really exist. They're basically flexing their attention between one thing and another thing and switching context really quickly. But they can juggle 5 screens at a time. So they could be watching that video game, reading the Reddit thread, texting one group of friends, having a conversation with another group of friends on the headset of the video game, and also FaceTiming their mom at the same time on the iPad. And keep all the conversations straight and everything straight in their minds.
And
in
yet,
short-term memory.
when you look at the research and the fact that we're still running around with our caveman, cavewoman brain in our limbic system, so many people say it's just not effective to, and I'm glad you didn't call it multitasking. You said not multitasking, but what was that term you called it?
Oh, I call it multiflexing because you're
multiflexing,
you're flexing your attention between one thing and another.
Can they really be successful doing that? Because it just doesn't seem like their brain is built to do that.
It actually has rewired. Their brains have physically changed. But what's happening is because they're switching context so quickly, their attention span has shrunk significantly. So while millennials had about a 12-second attention span, Gen Z have a 7 to 8 second attention span.
In that whole famous line of goldfish have longer attention span than the Gen Z. Right. I don't know if that's really true or not, but
it's getting closer.
So how does a marketer deal with that?
Yeah. So you've got to, the story is so important. And I'm glad we're on this podcast here where we talk about
the business of story. Dun, dun, dun.
Business of story, right. Because the story and the hook and just grabbing that attention is so important, because this generation, while they have much shorter attention spans, they actually have a superpower. And this superpower is that they can hyper focus. So basically what's happened is because they've been deluged by just a constant waterfall of content throughout basically their entire lives, they have been trained and their brains have rewired for them to make decisive snap judgments. But once they decide that they're interested in something, once you've had that, once you've hooked them, their interests quickly turn to obsessions. They become mini stalkers and they just want to deep dive. They crave all the behind the scenes story. They want to know personal and authentic insights. They want to know everything there is to know about a particular topic.
So who's a good example brand that is doing this well, and how are they telling and parsing out their stories?
Well, of course, that where they go to for a lot of this kind of stuff where you can see it really well is on Instagram. And I'll give you an example. I'm going to tell you a story about hedgehogs here. So there was this girl, she was 13. We were doing an interview with her. She's 13 years old, and she was scrolling through Instagram one day, and have you seen them scroll on Instagram? They scroll so fast, you can barely, for me, I can barely process the images that are flying by, but they seem to. And she's scrolling by really fast, and a picture pops out at her, and she's like, it's a picture of a pet hedgehog. And she goes, wow, I want a pet hedgehog. So she goes to her mother and she says, Mom, can I get a pet hedgehog? And her mother says, absolutely not. She says, first of all, they're wild animals. Secondly, aren't they nocturnal? Don't they sleep all day? They'd make terrible pets. And thirdly, aren't they pokey? This is not a cuddly, cute pet like you think it might be.
Aren't they pokey? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, she's like, I don't know much about hedgehogs, but I think that's what I know. Mm-hmm. So the girl goes back but instead of being defeated, she decides that she's going to deep dive into this. And so she spends a full week, every spare moment she has, learning about hedgehogs. She watches every video she can find on YouTube about pet hedgehog ownership, and she's just watching everything. She's following hedgehogs on Instagram, everything, the whole 9 yards. And so when she goes back to her mother in a week, so all the arguments her mother had, she had answers to. And it was to the point where her mother finally said, fine, how much does a pet hedgehog cost? And the girl says, well, about $500. She had an answer. She was like, it costs about $500 when you buy the pet hedgehog and the cage and the food and all the stuff that's associated with a pet hedgehog. And the mother says, well, if you can raise $500, then you can get your pet hedgehog. You can buy it yourself. So, and thinking that it was going to die right there because there's no way that this 13-year-old was going to get $500.
But she's committed.
Before this passed. But she's committed. She's committed. So she goes to YouTube and she starts typing in how to make money from home. And she starts watching videos. And so she decides that she wants to make and sell slime. She thinks that would be a great idea. So
slime?
Slime for the kids to play with. It's a big fad right now that they play with slime, kind of like fidget spinners, like they play.
Oh, okay. Being an empty nester now, I guess I have not been hit with the slime movement. All right.
So her mother has these essential oils lying around the house. And so she starts making this like high-end slime, like lavender scented slime and peppermint scented slime and orange spice slime.
That's awesome.
And she packages them nicely and she takes them down to her local convenience store. And she says, will you sell these on your counter? And they say no, but she negotiates with them and she finally gets them to say yes. And so they start selling her slime, and within a week she has enough money to buy her pet hedgehog. But she figures out that she's making so much money selling slime that she opens a business on Instagram selling slime, and she's selling it from Instagram. Meanwhile, she doesn't have a website, just Instagram, where she's selling slime, just an account for that. And then on top of that, she gets the pet hedgehog and puts the pet hedgehog onto Instagram. And now the pet hedgehog is paid and sponsored, and she's making money on the pet hedgehog too.
Oh my God. I just pulled this up. I wonder if this is, I don't know if it's her or not, but I don't see a hedgehog in it. That is amazing. So she was able to pull all this together, make the money, buy her pet hedgehog, and now she's an influencer on Instagram.
Well, she isn't, but the hedgehog is.
Yes. The hedgehog is. Wow. That's pretty impressive.
And I love that story so much because it talks about all the different elements that we're seeing in Gen Z. We're seeing this snap judgment, this deep dive, this like sort of hyper focus. We're seeing they're very clear. Gen Z is very clear on where to post and look for content. So they're not going to go to Google to go find information on a hedgehog like maybe we would because we're a little bit older. They're going to go to Instagram and they're going to go to YouTube and they're going to go to different places to find different types of content. They're very discerning about where they look for content.
So let's go back to that earlier question. Who are you seeing out there brand-wise that is reaching out and really connecting with Gen Z in a great way that people could use as an example of how to do your storytelling right to connect with and keep Gen Zs around?
One brand that I think is really doing this right is Peloton. And the reason
they're the athletic equipment maker.
Yeah,
right?
So they had figured out a way to take a stationary bike, which you can buy for $60 used on Craigslist, put a screen on it, gamify it, put influencers on there, that actually teach all the courses on demand. So it's kind of like YouTube where you can just pull up a video on demand and take a course whenever you want to. And they have figured out how to do this and charge thousands for their bikes.
And so they're not selling those obviously to Gen Zers, are they?
They actually are, because they do free financing for 39 months. So they have gotten the price point down to a place where it's just as expensive to buy this bike as it is to get a gym membership.
And they are actually pulling in then these early 20-somethings that don't have
20s.
A lot of money, but are able to
But they're able to pay $60 for their bike financing plus $40 a month for the subscription, for the on-demand subscription. And so I think they're doing this really well. And one of the reasons they do this well is because people in Gen Zs don't follow brands as much as they follow people. So Peloton has basically made all the instructors influencers in terms of you don't follow Peloton, you follow the instructors. So you feel connected to specific instructors when you're riding.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. That's how they get their influencers involved. So in essence, people aren't...
And they're celebrities. Like they had to like build an extra door in the back of their studio to sneak them out so they wouldn't be mobbed by people in the streets of New York. These, spinning instructors have become total celebrities as a result.
I mean, I wonder if Peloton took a nod from Soul Cycle, because wasn't that kind of happening with the development of that brand as well, that these instructors became at least local influencers and people would come in as much for them as they would for the exercise.
Yeah, I probably. I think what's really different about this is that it's in your home and it's gamified, and they've made it fun. They put a leaderboard on there and stats, and you can see how many weeks you've consistently, gone on rides in a row, and they've made it fun and competitive.
But that seems
almost like a video game.
Yeah, like that would be, attractive to millennials, to Gen Z or Xers.
It is attractive to millennials too, but they're doing a good job attracting young 20-somethings as well.
Yeah. What are some of the other trends that you have seen that makes you feel like the Gen Z market really stands out with those trends?
Yeah, so one of the trends is that because they're processing more information than ever before, at just this unprecedented rate, collecting and organizing information has become second nature. So they are these natural aggregators of information, and they aggregate information in a number of different ways. They're creating boards on Pinterest, or they're texting themselves links. They're creating bookmarks again. We haven't seen people use bookmarks since baby boomers. They're creating bookmarks again. They are creating lists and albums on Instagram, like collections on Instagram, where they're saving stuff. They may not ever go back and look at it, but it makes them feel good that they've saved it. Like if they needed to find it again, they could. So they're aggregating and collecting information without even knowing they're doing it to some effect. I've talked to a number of people recently, like Gen Zers recently, where they're like, oh, I don't like things anymore on Instagram. I just bookmark them instead of liking them, which is kind of an interesting concept where this has become a way to, oh, I like it, so I'm going to save it. They take screenshots of everything. If you look at your 26-year-old's screenshot gallery versus maybe your 35-year-old screenshot gallery, it will be ridiculous. Like just when they're home at Thanksgiving or whenever they're home next time, take a look at the screenshot galleries, the difference between them.
Huh.
The 26-year-old will take screenshots of everything.
That is so interesting. Now, have you seen the book written by Jonathan Haidt, a very famous American social psychologist, called The Coddling of the American Mind, How Good Intentions and Bad Ideas Are Setting Up a Generation for Failure? And in this book, he's speaking, exactly about the Gen Z market, and especially how they have come onto college campuses and now just moving their way into corporate America. And the rage, the hurts, being triggered, oversensitive. They cover a lot of these different things. And in the book, they just talk about how we have tried to do our best as parents and teachers and whatever, but we may have actually set them up for failure because they don't deal with stress as well, again, according to them and their research. And they really look at the Gen Z as the very first generation, I think it started in 1995, that was born with a digital device. I mean, they were raised and had a digital device and a phone, at a very young age in their hand. But I think it's a really interesting book where yours is looking at, the research about how do you actually talk to and connect with this amazing generation. Here's how we've raised them have kind of set them up for failure unless they can kind of start pulling themselves up by the bootstraps in a lot of respects.
Yeah, and I definitely see that and agree with that in some ways. Like for Generation Z, the phone is creating, and just their digital devices are creating all of these new lines of thought, this 4D thinking. They are thinking in totally different ways, new ways, but it's also killing our emotional and social development. Mm-hmm. I mean, even the way that they're raised today, like even as parents, two kids are arguing on the playground, we rush to separate them. So they don't learn that conflict resolution. Schools are giving up playground time. Kids are like programmed by their devices to act instantly. For example, there was a situation in a school near us recently where a high school student or maybe it was a middle school student, but somebody was expelled because they had posted a nasty photo of their teacher with a bad description, maybe some profanity on it. And they were expelled from the school. But when we were kids, it would have taken us so long to do that. We couldn't do that instantly. So they're making these really quick snap judgments. I mean, think about it. You would have had to bring your camera to the school, take a picture of the teacher. You would have had to go to the Kodak store. You would have had to wait a week to get your film developed. You would have had to take your glue out and find construction paper and glue it to paper and write something nasty on it. And then by then your you're feeling, whatever triggered you in the first place to be upset with that teacher, it's probably past.
Exactly. And I think about when we went to school, all the stuff that we pulled and never got suspended once. If you did any of that in this day and age, you'd be out on your ear. I mean, for weeks.
So failure, done. You're done. You can't make a mistake because you're gone. And I mean, there's that. And then there's like the fact that teens are never bored. Like they always have a device. Being bored like was such an important part of my childhood. I don't know about you, but you know, you hung out with your friends and you talked and you actually had conversations and thought of silly things and
invented things.
Invented things, right? You created things. You created little worlds for yourselves, right? Like a little imaginary stuff.
All right. Sarah, this is fascinating. I need to take a quick break here, but when we come back, I want for you and I to put ourselves to the test. I'm going to think during the break of a company, and we're going to make up a company, and I'm going to come to you as the owner of the company and say, I need to connect this particular product or widget to the Gen Z world. My entire success is based on that. And then you, off the top of your head, give me the most important 3 to 5 things that I should first consider in my marketing plan. Is that fair enough?
Oh, gosh. Okay. Better be a long break.
Here we go. We'll be back with Sarah Weiss in her new book, Instabrain, The New Rules for Marketing to Generation Z, right after this. Many of you have been following me in the business of story on social media for a while now, and I really appreciate it. And if you're not, I hope you will. We share valuable business storytelling tips to help your brand stand out among the awful noise out there. And we do it all thanks to Sendable, a social media management platform that helps over 3,000 digital agencies worldwide to work with their clients, breathe life into their brands, and get their stories heard on social media. What we like about Sendable is they make it super easy to manage your content and your stories online. They allow you to source content from clients and collaborate closely with them to create a social media strategy built on true and proven storytelling principles. You can reliably plan and schedule content to be automatically published to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Pinterest, and more. And you can demonstrate the impact that this content has had on your audience growth and conversion by reaching out through their in-depth reporting and analytics. There's much, much, much more that you can do. But you know what? I think maybe my favorite feature has to be Smart Posts functionality. Now, what Smart Posts are is it makes it incredibly easy to craft social media content and in one single step, customize it for each platform, giving you the best chance of driving engagement and getting people to pay attention to your content. Sendable truly makes managing so many channels an absolute breeze. I know, you have a lot of choices when it comes to social media management apps, so I wanted to let you know we here at the Business of Story can't recommend Sendable enough. Gavin and his team are so great that they have a special offer just for you. You can now get, as a special offer for Business of Story listeners, Sendable's Traction Plan for only $69 a month. That's a 30% savings. So sign up now at sendable.com/Park30. Believe me, your stories will take off. Welcome back to the Business of Story. I've got Sarah Weiss with us, author of Instabrain, The New Rules for Marketing to Generation Z. And now I've got a test for Sarah. So we have just invented this fabulous new product, and we know it's going to be a killer because everybody we share it with, they just absolutely love it. And they keep saying, when can I get it, in my hands, or more importantly, when can I get it on my head? And so, Sarah, I've just brought you in. You are going to consult with us, and I need 3 or 5 surefire ways to connect with the Gen Z market and get them in my camp so that they're sharing it with their world. And my product is, are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
It's called Slinky Hair Snare. Not Slinky Hair Care, but Hair Snare. And what it is it's a concoction we've created that when you put it on your hair overnight, it grows your hair by a foot but not straight. It grows it like the little spiral Slinky toys we all grew up with and played with. Now, the Gen Z market may not have played with these toys, but their parents certainly have. And so they are going to understand the Slinky hair snare. We are going to launch it in 2020 in January. It's going to be a North American launch first, and then we'll take it out to the world. But we have to have the 13 to 25-year-olds. It's gender neutral. So boys and girls, we're assuming it's going to, probably lean towards a female demographic, but we think there's a huge male population in there that will have a lot of fun with the Slinky hair snare. So what should we do?
All right. So I love this name too. Hair snare. When you care for your hair. Okay.
Or if you don't, maybe when you don't care for your hair.
When you don't care for your hair, right.
Hair snare. Remember, it grows by a foot and it becomes this spiral little Slinky toy. So you're walking around like Sideshow Bob from The Simpsons.
Right. So the first thing that you would probably need to do here is to consider what platforms you're going to use to market this Slinky hair snare that you've got. So Gen Z is very clear on where to post and where to look for content. So Instagram is for random inspiration, whereas Pinterest would be for specific inspiration, like hair care or hairstyles or something like that, like inspiration in one particular area. Twitter is for professional announcements and news, so that's out. We've got Google, which is really for homework or discrete facts, so that's out. We've got YouTube, though, which is DIY and learning videos. And then we've got TikTok. And you should probably think about TikTok because this is kind of a wonky product. It's a little bit fun. I can see it being set to music while you're using this product. Have some product placements or give it to influencers who are blowing up on TikTok right now. For those of you who do not know TikTok, it is for kind of fun lip singing videos, but it's also for little 10-second like dramatic skits, highly edited kind of situations. They're about 10 seconds long and they're all set to music, almost all of them set to music. It's really to make people laugh and to also just kind of feel like they're a part of something. It's this special little subculture that their parents just don't get. So a lot of the younger Gen Zs are on TikTok right now. 13 to maybe 16-year-olds love TikTok. And it is like the new Snapchat is what I call it, because 5 years ago, people were using Snapchat, people were using Snapchat and going, I'm using this because my mom doesn't get it. Well, my parents get Snapchat now, so now they're using TikTok. Like a slight rebellion. So we got to think about that. We've got to think about Snapchat, which is probably not going to work unless you're doing a behind the scenes type of thing. So Snapchat's it's for behind the scenes brands like an influencer. I could see an influencer putting on their Slinky hair snare.
The hair snare
behind the scenes before they record something. I could see that. So maybe Snapchat a little bit. And then they've got text messages really for more urgent things like where are you, when are we going to meet, so not that. And then Facebook, it's for parents, so definitely not that.
Oh, how times have changed.
Yes. So I would think about considering very carefully where the content is going to go, and you're probably going to be on Instagram, primarily on YouTube, and on TikTok for this brand new product.
That's what I was marking too. So it would be fun to build that Instagram group. I mean, even doing some Instagram stories of the night before of putting it on, the sleeping, and then the next morning they unveil their Slinky hair snare and it goes ba-bam.
Right. Lots of user-generated content. That's the name of the game here.
You can do a lot of fun there.
Yeah. And so the second thing we should do is talk about who the influencers are who are going to use this, because you can't launch a new brand without influencers here.
And you have to have influencers with Gen Z, is that right?
Yes, you absolutely do. And it's not the mega influencers anymore either. Gen Z is actually more willing to trust and buy products that are recommended by micro influencers, which are like maybe 100,000 followers, and even nano influencers, especially local nano influencers, which have maybe even just over 1,000 followers, but super engaged followers and in a geographic area.
So you're going to want to have to build your brand story around how you involve these and get them. And I would imagine finding a micro or nano influencer is more difficult than finding the big celeb name and so forth. Do celeb names work?
Not as much. So celebrities are seen as not approachable and not relatable anymore because they don't see every moment of their lives. They're not getting like that slice of life on Instagram like you would with an up and coming influencer.
Oh, that's interesting. So
yeah.
you
so
go
the celebrities that do do a really good job of this, though, it's because they've made themselves accessible in some way. So Cardi B is a great example of that because everything that she wears, you can buy on fashionnova.com. And they know that it feels within reach because they could go to the website and buy it.
Interesting. So you have spoken here then about digital channels. Does traditional advertising meet, this Gen Z where they live at all anymore?
Yeah. Well, the actual traditional, I was thinking about selling it online. We assume that we're selling it online, but actually Gen Z is shopping in retail stores again. Can you believe it?
Really?
Yes. So you'd have to figure out where you would want to demo it. Like maybe it's in a Sephora or something like that. So you make some sort of strategic partnership with a channel like Sephora or Ulta Beauty, or I don't know where boys go to buy their products, but those would be good channels for girls because you said this was gender neutral. The thing about Gen Z is that they're doers. This is a generation of doers. So they don't just want to see your product and watch your product. They want to participate with it. So a place like Sephora is a great spot for them to actually like touch and feel and try the product.
Wow, that's interesting. What are some of the big retailers, the bricks and mortar, as they used to say, or maybe they still do, that are really attracting the Gen Z in? Are Gen Z's hitting the fashion square malls like they used to?
What's really funny is that they're not going to the big stores anymore. So they're going more to like smaller brand stores. So instead of going to like a DSW to buy a pair of Nikes or a Kohl's to buy a pair of Nikes, what they would do is go like find a Nike store, or they would order through the Nike.com website instead of like an Amazon. Even though it's the same shoes, they prefer to go to the brand directly.
That's interesting. And why do you think that is?
I think it's because they're showcasing that they know what they want.
They're strutting their stuff. They've done their research. They've done their screenshots
and
all that.
I also wonder if it's also like when there's too many options, it's harder to decide. Mm-hmm. So they just decide on one brand, and then there's only 20 shoes to choose from, instead of like 500.
And it sounds like they've decided in advance, so they're just going to go into that particular retailer.
Yeah, it cuts it down for them. Yeah. The other thing, if we're talking about things that you should do with Slinky
hair snare. Yeah, it's kind of catchy, isn't it?
So one of the really interesting findings that we found was that Gen Z shares during the research phase of their products. Like while they're learning about the products, they share things to their audience about the products online. But once they've purchased the product, they don't share as much. They feel like it's sort of like bragging if they share post-purchase. So a lot of companies today are encouraging sharing post-purchase when they should actually be encouraging sharing pre-purchase.
That's interesting. And do you think that goes back to their parents teaching them how to get on their digital device and do their own homework and do their own searching, so they're used to this research side of the interwebs versus just the pure personal promotion and sharing?
Yeah, I think so. I think they're really trying to provide value to other people in sharing as well. A lot of them have many different Instagram accounts, and this goes along with the thing we were talking about before, where we were talking about how they're natural aggregators of information. One of the ways that they aggregate information is by creating multiple, like they bucket information and collect information by creating multiple Instagram accounts. So 55%, so over half of Gen Z has over 2 Instagram accounts, and most of them have 5 or 6 Instagram accounts.
Wow. I
And
mean,
they're
that's
for different interests or different slivers of their personality. Like you've heard the terms Finsta and Rinsta, fake Instagram account and real Instagram account. They're not that fake. That's a misnomer. It's just a different sliver of their personality or a different interest that they're into, that they go on there and just have information on hair care if that's what they're into. Like they'd curate the accounts are very curated, like a hair care account where they're following hair care influencers and posting things about Slinky.
And this goes back to their ability to be able to what did you say?
Multi-flex.
Thank you. Where I have a hard enough time.
It's a made-up term.
I have a hard enough time with one Instagram account. I could not imagine trying to manage 2, 3, or 4 to all my different beats.
Yeah, or 5 or 6. I mean, just imagine if you're like a 13-year-old girl who's into photography. Maybe you want to start a photography account, and you're into hair care, and you're into makeup, and then you're also into I don't know, maybe you follow a specific YouTuber named Codyco. So you'd have 3 accounts for those 3 things, and then you'd have 2 more, one for your high school acquaintances, and then another one for like your close friends. They call it a spam account. It's actually for just their close circle, like 10 to 15 people, where they can be a little bit more real. But even on those spam accounts where they're only sharing with their closest friends, they still tell me things like, oh yeah, I post the good stuff. And I'm like, oh, so you're still curating even on the ones that's supposed to be for just your closest friends.
Yeah. It sounds like a really fascinating generation to work with. Final question on them for me.
Sure.
How does the political world, climate change, social action, how does that resonate with them?
So it's interesting because they have grown up in a time of unprecedented diversity, and they just assume different things about fairness and justice than people before them, than generations before them. They are much more socially liberal from a social standpoint, but at the same time, they're much more fiscally conservative. And if you think about the upcoming elections, like this is the first time that many of these Gen Zers are going to be voting, and none of the candidates meet that. We're very like right or left. None of the candidates demonstrate being socially liberal and fiscally conservative. So it's going to be an interesting election. It's
fascinating because they grew up in the Obama years, right? So having an Afro-American, a black man in the office is no big thing to them, and yet it still seems to freak out so much of America.
Right.
Of course, divided around
women can run for political office, of course.
Yeah. I mean, they have not really been experienced it any other way. And so what happened recently with the Democratic Party in the 2018 election, a lot of people on the right were just saying, whoa, check that, liberal rush out. I would imagine Gen Z is going, what? This is just normal. This is, the way it should look. This is the way it's always looked for us growing up.
Yeah. So I'm so excited to see what happens in terms of how they're going to react. One thing that's interesting is that millennials were all about social good, and they were dedicating their lives to social good and following their passions and things like that. Gen Z talks about social good and says that they want to do good in the world, but at the same time, they're not willing to sacrifice the pay cut to make that happen, to do that full time. So it's an interesting juxtaposition. I'm interested to see what's going to happen in future years in terms of our nonprofits. Are we going to have like a hard time staffing?
Wow.
Are we going to, things like that?
Amazing. Really interesting stuff. Sarah, thank you so much for being here. How can people find out more about you? And more importantly, where can I send your Slinky hair snare product? For being on the show. I mean, I need to get you a copy of that or an example of that brand.
Right. Well, definitely
seriously.
Check me out on the IG. We've got definitely Instagram. You can find me at Sarah V Weiss, SARAH, and then V, and then Weiss, WEISE. I'm definitely on Instagram. You can find me on LinkedIn. I actually just launched my first LinkedIn learning course. So I do have a market research course on LinkedIn Learning if you're interested in learning more about the foundations of market research and how we do that.
And is that for Gen Z or is that just
No, it's just
general?
the foundations of market research.
Okay.
I actually just signed a contract to do 2 more courses with LinkedIn Learning, formerly lynda.com, where one is on generational design, and then the other one is going to be on storytelling.
Oh, really?
So, yes.
Cool. Well, you'll have to let me know what you're going to be talking about in storytelling.
I don't know yet, to be honest with you, because I literally just signed the contract last week.
Well, you know where to go. Listen to The Business of Story every week right here, and everything you'll ever want to know about storytelling.
I will tell you too, my business is called Bixa Research, and you can find us at Bixa, Bixa, research.com.
Oh. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for being here. It's been an absolute pleasure. Love your book. Great book for anyone out there that wants to get a better idea, get their head around the Gen Z market. And I got to ask you, why Instabrain? That has to have something to do with that Gen Z brain.
You know what? It's just they move so fast and they're all over Instagram. And it just kind of came to me one day. I was like, yeah, Instabrain, of course. That's their brains are changing, Instabrain. And it just kind of stuck.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for listening to this edition of The Business of Story. If you like what Sarah had to say, or you know someone that can benefit from her wisdom around the Gen Z market, by all means, share this episode with them. And of course, go to iTunes and give us your thoughts about the program. Give us a rating. The ratings really help us reach out to a much grander market out there. And we appreciate your time, your attention, and sharing us with your world. And of course, if I can be of service to you, you know where to find me over at Business of Story. And I want to give another shout out to Sendable, an amazing online storytelling platform. We appreciate them being here to sponsor the Business of Story, and would love for you to go over. If you're not already on Sendable, check them out and let your story shine through their platform. Thank you for being here, and join us next week when we will have another amazing story artist like Sarah. And until then, remember that the most potent story you will ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make it a great one. Thanks for listening. Okay, folks, we're back with a little Easter egg. First, I got to ask, Sarah, do Gen Zs like Easter eggs in their content?
Oh, absolutely. They love like anything, any small little inside joke that they get that they feel like it's special for them. Yeah, they love it.
Okay, well, I don't know if this is an inside joke or something special, but it's something, well, I know it'll be something special, but it's something that I wanted to ask and I forgot. So I'm going to ask right now. You, Sarah, have done some amazing work in market research, and now with your new book out about Gen Z. So take us to a time in your life that maybe at that point didn't seem very significant, but in hindsight, it has shaped and informed who you are today.
Okay. So when I was getting my MBA, I was doing my MBA at night while I was working, and I was taking a negotiations class with a former FBI hostage negotiator. So a really special class. And his name was Chris Voss. He actually has a book out called Never Split the Difference. Amazing. It was just, the class was incredible. And I went up to him afterwards and I said, I've really enjoyed your class. I've learned a lot about empathy in negotiations, which is what one of the things he really emphasizes in his negotiation strategy. And I said, can I do some independent studies with you? And he said, you want to know about empathy? He said, go volunteer, empathy in high stakes negotiations. He said, go volunteer at a suicide hotline for a year, then come back and talk to me about it. And I did. And so for a year, I volunteered at a suicide hotline as a listener. I had the Saturday night shift from 9 to midnight, and I listened to people's stories. And I talked to people and learned empathy. And I realized that empathy is something that can be learned and taught. And at the time, I was doing it because my negotiations professor taught me to, said that I should do it. And I thought it would make me a better negotiator. But it has actually made me a better person, just listening to the stories, and a better researcher in terms of building that rapport so quickly with people, even people who are very different than me, because, even though we've gone through different things in our lives, we still feel the same emotions. So that's that empathy that he taught me about. So that was a really special time in my life where just a little nugget of wisdom. And it was funny because I went back to him and I said, okay, I did it. I volunteered for a year at a suicide hotline. And he said, wow, I've been telling people to do that for years and nobody ever has. But
wow.
Yeah.
What a little gift the universe handed you just because you asked and then you were willing to act.
Exactly. So it was just really, and it really fermented a wonderful relationship and with a wonderful mentor, because I'm still in contact with him today. I actually was just talking to him last week. Yeah, just a wonderful friend and mentor now.
That is cool. Would you recommend anyone volunteering for a suicide hotline, or do you think it takes a special sort of person?
I think anyone can learn from it. I do think it takes a certain mindset, and I don't know if I could have done it for more than a year. It's hard and it takes a toll on you, but it is an amazing experience to be a part of something, and also to really connect with people of all walks of life.
That is so cool, and I can see how it has impacted you and your work ever since. Thank you so much for sharing your Easter egg with us.
Yep. Thank you.